Well, I'd like to welcome you all to our introductory session of Growing Kids God's Way. And I'd like to start out by sharing with you one of the most basic premises that we hold to. And it's this. Folks, raising good children is not a matter of chance. It's a matter of right parenting. And folks, you do make a difference. That should be good news to you. You are an influence. You make a difference because you make choices in parenting. You can have great families. And teenage rebellion, it is not a given. It is not something that you automatically have to expect. It's not something that's just a natural phenomena that it's going to happen no matter what you do by way of following any biblical principle. It's not something that you necessarily have to expect. It's just not automatic. In fact, we want you to know, throughout this series, we're going to encourage you to understand that the teen years should be and can be the most wonderful years of the parent-child relationship. In fact, we're going to encourage you to look forward to those years as the crown of your parenting. It's the time when, it's going to be the time when everything comes together, when all of the relationships solidify, when the child is able now to communicate to you according to moral principle, the principles that you have been putting into their hearts. Yes, young parents, you do make a difference, and raising good children is not a matter of chance. Now, one fact that I trust will be made clear throughout our series, Growing Kids God's Way, and one that I want to verify with you from the beginning, is that Anne-Marie and I, when we were raising our children, we really enjoyed them. We enjoyed them in the early years, we enjoyed them in the middle years, we enjoyed them in the teen years. Now that they're married and they have their own families, we enjoy them even more. It just keeps getting better. We really did enjoy our children, but I want to tell you what is more significant. What is more important is the fact that our friends enjoyed our children. Our neighbors enjoyed our children. Our relatives enjoyed our children. Their Sunday school teachers enjoyed them. Their teachers enjoyed them. We want you to enjoy your children. We really do. But we realize that the worst parent in the world can enjoy their own children. In fact, we've met some of the worst parents in the world. We've seen their kids. So the question I want to challenge you with is this. I want you to think about this as you think about the possibility of going through Growing Kids God's Way. Does anyone else enjoy your children? See, that's a legitimate question. That's a legitimate benchmark to measure where you're at in your parenting. Just ask yourself, is there anyone else who really enjoys my children? Do my children put other people on edge? Do my children, by their very presence, cause stress? Now, you moms, you know what I'm talking about because you have all had children over to your house that you wish their mommies would come and get them. Because you know there's something about that child. There was something about that child that the way they talked to you, the way they played with your children's toys, the way they sort of walked around your house. There was just something about that child. Yes, you were tolerant of their behavior. You have to be, you're Christian. But you really didn't enjoy the child. Now, our challenge to you is that your child? You know if that's your child. Ask yourself on a regular basis, is there anyone else besides Grandma and Grandpa, because they could tolerate anything, is there anyone else who really enjoys my children? You've also had children over that you've enjoyed. You've had children over that for some reason the way they talk to you, that respect, that attitude, the way they handle themselves, the self-control, the way they handle their children. There was something about that child. And I guess our question is that your child? Because if it is, then we know that you are in the process of sowing on the moral fabric of their little hearts a sense of otherness, which is really the core of biblical ethics. It's a sense of knowing how to respond, when to respond. It's a sense that includes other people and other activities. That's a legitimate benchmark. And that's something that Growing Kids God's Way is going to help you with. You see, Growing Kids God's Way is all about helping parents raise a morally responsible child who will be a blessing to his parents, a blessing to the community, and not a curse on his parents or the rest of the community. See, it's more than a moral child, because inherent in the fabric of moral training is wisdom training. It's beyond just raising a nice child, a good child, a moral child. The entire moral process speaks to wisdom training, speaks to intellectual advancement, academic advancement. It speaks to discernment. It's not just an isolated area of moral development. Everything comes from moral training. And folks, we realize that raising a morally responsible child, one that other people enjoy, is not an easy pursuit in these confusing days of parenting, with so many parents who have already been victimized by faulty philosophies, and that victimization is showing up in their children. And now many of you are curious and you're wondering, can it all be fixed? I can't tell you how many years we've been doing this, that it seems every year we have couples, and this is really a sad commentary, we have couples in our classes who have no children, who come in just to find out whether or not it's possible to raise children because of what they see all around them. The scene is so discouraging in our society, and we don't want you to be part of that. We know it can be discouraging. But it doesn't have to be. We're going to start with your mind. We're going to start with your heart. And we're going to start passing on biblical ethics, placing them into your thinking process so that you could raise a morally responsible child. Now, one of the goals of Growing Kids God's Way is to help you establish a biblical mindset for parenting, a biblical worldview, one that will allow you to distinguish truth from error and fact from opinion, and one that will not leave you a victim, but one that will reward you for your biblical efforts to rear a morally responsible child. There are rewards for doing it God's way. Now, besides this introduction, just tell you a little bit about the program. There are 17 core lessons in Growing Kids God's Way. With that many lessons, obviously there's a commitment on your part. This is not one of those classes where you come for a few weeks, you appreciate the material, and you go home. You all have been to different seminars. You've been to weekend conferences. You've had video series in your church, maybe running 2, 3, 4 weeks on a Sunday night or a Wednesday night. We realize that you people appreciate the information you get from the speakers. The problem is you do not appropriate it. Growing Kids God's Way is designed as a discipleship program because we want you to go beyond appreciation. We want you to appropriate the principles, and the only way you will appropriate these principles is through an ongoing accountability, discipleship relationship. That's what you need. That's what Growing Kids God's Way is all about. You see, the curriculum is divided into 2 major sections. There are 10 sessions that lay down a whole moral foundation, how we are to live in this society, how we are to train our children. It's all of the give and takes of life. And then there are 8 sessions of practical application. 3 sources of teaching in Growing Kids God's Way. Let me just talk about this and then I'm going to review the content of our program. 3 sources of teaching. First of all, there will be my instruction as I speak to you folks. I will be teaching you, talking to you, going through the principles, the themes of every lesson. And then we're going to have a wrap-up session. Now join us in the wrap-up session are our co-laborers, Eric and Julie Abel. And they're going to be working with Anne-Marie and I as we sit down and we bring together all of the practical principles that are derived from each lesson. How to take the principle and how to apply it at that moment. And then the third source of learning, third source of teaching is going to be your homework. I want to stress you need to do your homework. There's a lot of reading. There is study questions. At the end of every lesson, there will be study questions you will be required to answer. In fact, we're not going to say who has the answer to question 1. We're going to say, Sharon, what is the answer to question 1? You know, Sharon better be ready. Or Trish, question 2. Now you tell us question 2. It's not an option. We're not hoping someone did their homework. We are assuming you did do your homework because you are taking your parenting seriously. So there are the 3 sources of instruction. My teaching, the wrap-up session, which will be all the practical, and then reviewing everything, reviewing the homework assignments. Here's what we're going to be teaching you. Let me run through some of these lessons. Lesson 1, how to raise a moral child. The whole emphasis of that lesson is how to communicate moral principle and put the moral principle into the heart of your children so that it will be principle-driven in their behavior. The second is how to prevent the extremes of legalism and libertine and permissive parenting. How do you know that you're not overreacting? How do you know you're not too restrictive? How do you know when you're crossing the boundary? The third chapter is a survey of the secular parenting philosophies and the history that has led to a number of the current myths from which many of you are parenting. We're going to be looking at that. It's called the secular mystics. We have the title because much of secular reasoning is just that. It's mysticism. I mean, that's all it is. It's mysticism. There's no reality. There's no truth. It's just a matter of people's opinions coming together, unproven. Chapter 4, we'll talk about right beginnings. Folks, we're going to stress this to you over and over and over again. How important the husband-wife relationship is in the parenting process. Your child's basic security is initially associated with how you two love each other. And when you touch security, you affect every other learning discipline. You better have that together. Now, if you're a single parent, you're saying, but I've lost already. No, because God is the father of the fatherless. We will talk to you about that. We have a whole Growing Kids God's Way for the single parent, and we're going to emphasize all of that. But for you who are together as couples, we want you to know how critical it is in your parenting process to understand how the husband-wife relationship ultimately sets the quality of the parent-child relationship. Then we're going to talk about how to say I love you. This is going to be fun. Our fifth session is literally knowing how to say I love you to our mates and to our children in such a way that they actually have the sensation, the very feeling of love. They feel you really do love me. And that has to do with knowing how to communicate love in one of the 5 languages of love. And then we're going to talk about the father's mandate. The next session deals directly with you dads. We're going to be talking about how to build a trusting relationship. There are 3 levels of relationships that we all experience. The first level is a biological one, which only proves biological propensity does not necessarily mean you're a daddy. It only means you can be a father. The second level of relationship is the sustenance level, the provision level. And that's where many dads are today. They're good providers, but that's where it stops. The third level is the relationship level. It's where the trust and the loyalty comes in. And we're going to talk about how to build a trusting and loyal family identity, how to build trust into your relationship with your children as fathers. And then we're going to talk about developing a child's conscience. That'll be, I think, session 7. This is so critical. You have to place God's moral principles somewhere. And as David said in Psalms 119:11, Thy word have I hid in my heart, that I might not sin against thee. He has taken God's standard. He has brought it down. He has done this. He has placed it into his conscience, Lev, L-E-B, for one reason, that he might walk worthy of God. He might walk in righteousness. That principle has to go someplace, and that's the conscience. We'll develop the whole understanding of the human conscience and how it relates to moral development. And then in chapters 8 to 10, or sessions 8 through 10, we're going to be talking about moral character development and the 6 natural relationships associated with that. There's respect for age. There's respect for authority. There's respect for parents. There's respect for peers. There's respect for property, and there's respect for nature. You realize within those 6 natural relationships, all moral training is identified. Everything. Those 6 relationships are true of every society, primitive or whether complex like ours. We need to learn how to respond in those 6 natural relationships. And then finally, in chapters and sessions 11 through 16, we're going to be talking about the issues related to motivational discipline, biblical discipline, correction, and encouragement. We're going to talk about what the standard is, calling a child to the standard. We're going to talk about the difference between skills and behavior. We're going to talk about the difference between foolishness and childishness. We're going to be talking about the encouragement side of discipline, how to use goal incentives, how to use rewards, properly use rewards, how to stay away from bribes, which is unacceptable for Christians. We're going to talk about the 3 levels of offenses. We're going to take you through a flow chart so that you'll know exactly what to do, when to do, and how to do it in terms of correction. We'll talk about logical and natural consequences and artificial consequences. We're going to talk about repentance and forgiveness. We're going to talk about restoration. We're going to talk about lying. We're going to talk about stealing, cheating, tattletaling, whining. All of those everyday things. All of that is in those sessions dealing with biblical discipline. And then in our last session, we're going to talk about the myth of adolescence issues related to teenage rebellion and how you can avoid it. How you can have a relationship with your teenagers. As I said earlier, it should be one of the finest relationships, the best years of your parenting. Now, in addition to those lessons, there are a number of appendixes which will become part of your homework assignment. You're going to have to read all of those to stay up with the class. You know, there's so much material to cover, and we desire to maximize our time, so it's important that you folks do all of your homework, because the rest of the class is going to be counting on you. You have to keep up. You have to set time aside. Now, let me just give you a few warnings here. First warning is this. Biblical ethics in parenting will challenge the status quo. Please understand that. Biblical ethics in parenting will challenge the status quo. As a result of you making changes in the life of your children, there will be other people that will take notice. Unfortunately, not everyone's going to be pleased with the fact that you have chosen to come to a higher standard. And all of a sudden there's rub between friendships. We want you to be aware of this before you even come in. But we also want you to be aware that you are not here to please man, you are here to please God. You are the steward. You are a steward of God's children. Biblical ethics will always challenge the status quo. And if that status quo is working from a lower standard, there will be people you will be upset. You call your child the first time and they come, other people will say, well, that's too restrictive. No, that's a higher standard. Your children have learned how to properly interrupt you. They've learned to look you in the eyes when you talk to them, and they have a confidence about them. Biblical ethics will always challenge the status quo. You know, because you will have success. We know you will have success. If you just apply some basic principles, you're going to have success. Let me remind you of the other side of it. Let us warn you. This can make you very, very prideful. Very prideful. You need to continually be walking in humility, thanking God for the knowledge you have, thanking Him for the relationship you have with your children. Because you will undo everything you're attempting to do good with your children if you have a prideful, haughty spirit in parenting. You know, parenting is the most prideful area of our life. It's the most prideful area of our family. I can talk to you about your marriage. I can talk to you about your spiritual condition. If you do not invite me in to talk to you about parenting, and if I just come and say, you know, I heard this lesson, and boy, I saw your kids in the nursery, and you could really use this, the hair on your neck will stand up. You walk in humility. Ladies and gentlemen, you worry about your own children. And then when others come up and say, help me, then you be prepared to give an answer for the hope that is in you as a result of your children being a testimony. They need to be the testimony. They need to be the ones who are calling the world to you, to those principles. I could tell you story after story. I could tell you stories of moms who have been in supermarkets where other mothers have literally followed them around because they were so amazed at the control they had over their children, the happiness of their children. I remember just one episode. A father took his son and daughter for a little walk at night. They went up to visit a friend. Now this was little Lukey was 2.5 years old, and the sister Malia was about 5, and they went up to visit a neighbor. And when they got to the sidewalk of this neighbor that led to the front door, a little girl appeared at the screen door, and behind this little girl you hear the statement, "Don't you go out that door." And the door opens up, the little girl comes running out, little brother follows her. Father comes to the door and says, "Don't you kids move." And as soon as he opens up the door and steps out there, they're taking off with their big wheels, they're riding, laughing, just totally ignoring their dad. So this neighbor goes out and talks to my friend. And they're having this conversation, and the neighbor says every once in a while, "You wait till your mother gets home, she'll get you kids." My friend's son, Lukey, saw something on the grass was about 25 feet over towards what he was looking at. And my friend Rick said, "Lukey, come on back here, son, please." Lukey turned around and said, "Yes, Dad," came right back. The guy looked. He said, "Do that again. Do that trick again. How did you do that? I'm yelling at my children. I'm screaming at them. I'm repeating myself. How did you do it?" That's when Rick was able to share. You know, I used to be a threatening, repeating parent, but I went to a parenting class which helped me understand how to avoid that entrapment. Why it's so important for the sake of my child to be able to respond correctly the first time they call, and respond. And respond with a happy attitude, in the sense that they are willing to respond that way. Now, be very careful. You can become very prideful in your success. But we do want you to know we will not back down from this. There is a right way to parent, and there is a wrong way to parent. There is not a platter of options out there. There is God's way. Not Gary and Ann Riesel's way. Please understand that. There is God's way. There are principles. There is right and there is wrong. There is good and there is evil. Values are not subject to feelings. Without God, you have no basis for objective ethics. You need God. And that's where we turn. We turn to the Word of God. We look at the Word of God. And Growing Kids God's Way is going to attempt to reflect God's truth. And be warned. This will be a difficult class for some of you. I can tell you because our experience tells us it will be difficult. Not that the content is difficult, but your past experience will now allow you to accommodate the principles. Many parents are reactive. That is, they are reacting to the way they were raised. Some were raised from restraint, so they become very permissive. Some were very permissive, so now they try to restrain the child. They're much more conservative. Some felt they weren't loved, so what do? They overindulge. Some overindulge, so they're going to withhold love. What we have to do is to bring you the conformity of God's Word and understand the mind of God when it comes to parenting, so you understand all of the balances. Whatever your background was, please understand the cycle must stop with you, or you're going to pass it on another extreme to your children. The cycle must stop with you. In regards to Growing Kids God's Way, there's no tricks, there's no gimmicks. The only thing we're going to be working on is the heart of your child. You see, folks, we're not concerned about their outward behavior. If that was the case, we could give you a lot of tricks to control outward behavior. Your children can be trained just like Shamu down in SeaWorld. They jump through the hoop to get squid at the end. You could bribe your children, you could scare your children, you could do all sorts of things to manipulate your children to right behavior. This is not what Growing Kids God's Way is all about. Growing Kids God's Way is about getting to the heart of the child. There's something about the child's heart. Jesus said all words and deeds proceed from the heart. Psalms 139 says that the heart is the portion of man that God looks on and searches. We're going after the heart because when you get the heart of the child, you get the total child. That's what we're after, so there won't be any tricks. We're more concerned about intrinsic motivation, child being driven by intrinsic principles, internal principles, than extrinsic motivation. There's a place for the carrot on the stick, but it's more important that we go after the character of the heart. Our emphasis is going to be on your child's moral health. Moral health. Moral training is the preventative medicine that fights off emotional deficiency. That's what Growing Kids God's Way is all about. Now we want to invite you to give consideration to become part of our process. Thank you for this opportunity. Listen to Eric and Julie. Well, for the last several minutes, I have been sharing with you some of the fundamental principles, some of the basic concepts of Growing Kids God's Way. Right now, it is my special privilege to be able to introduce our team, who's going to work with me as we go through the many sessions of Growing Kids God's Way. And the first member of that team, my co-laboring ministry, Darlene White and Marie.
Well, thank you, Gary. And it is our privilege to be able to share with you the principles of Growing Kids God's Way that God first used in our own lives with our children, and then since the early 80s has given us opportunity to share with other families, such as yourself, the principles from His Word. And we're not going to be doing it alone. We have Eric and Julie Abel who will be joining us. And Eric and Julie are the parents of a preteen and 2 boys, twin boys in the middle years, and then no longer a baby. The youngest is 5 at this time. So pleasure to have you with us.
Well, we're thrilled to be part of this series. Seems like only yesterday we were sitting in that first Growing Kids God's Way class, and the message you shared was so life-changing for us that now we look forward to passing that along to others.
And with our first child, we kind of parented for the moment by the seat of our pants. And it was not, in that first class that you really showed us the direction God had for us. And it changed not only our own Christian walk, it changed our marriage, and most of all, it changed how we approached our parenting.
Well, we certainly appreciate your testimony in your child rearing, because I can say, we can say, but you can't, how much your children mean to us. Their character, their attitudes, their hearts. It is such a positive example of biblical parenting. It's not idealism, it's something that's very achievable, but we know it's not because you have easy children. Some people I know look at your children and say, oh, well, they must be that easy. No one could have children that kind, that good, that patient, that under that much self-control. And yet we know parenting's a lot of work. A lot of work. And that's why, folks, this is more than, just a 3 or 4 week seminar. That's why there's plenty of reading to do. There's more than just some study questions, some verses to look up. That's why Growing Kids God's Way is as comprehensive as it really is, because there is so much work to parenting. We do not parent naturally, right? I mean, it's not a matter of instinct.
It'd be nice if it came that easy, but it is work. There's a lot of joy and pleasure that comes from it. Can also be some grief too, but we realize that if we follow God's principles, and no, we will not do everything 100% right. We will not make all of the right decisions, but we do need to leave room for God's grace, and that's where He is more than gracious to come in as we are obedient and applying His principles to our parenting.
Well, I want to say thank you again for Eric and Julie. You folks are going to be joining us in every wrap-up session, and the wrap-up time comes at the end of the teaching, where we're going to take the principles that I share in the main body of instruction and make them practical.
We hope so.
Right. So we're looking forward to that. We want to say thank you. Thank you for giving consideration to Growing Kids God's Way. And we look forward to having you join us in our very first session. God bless all of you in your decision.